Welcome to the Fiduciary Wise podcast. I'm Marta Hurst, one of your hosts from Fiduciary Wise. Whether you're a thought leader, service provider, CEO, or decision maker, this podcast is for you. We break down best practices, the services and solutions available to you, discuss the latest topics, and shake up the industry norms. Join us as we explore, challenge, and navigate the future of fiduciary responsibility together. All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Marta Hurst. I am a partner at Fiduciary Wise. I've spent about 20 years in retirement plans, 17 of that on the TPA side. I joined Fiduciary Wise a couple years ago. I am a ASPA member, and this year helping with the Women in Retirement Conference Committee. I love what I do at Fiduciary Wise. I get to interact with plan sponsors and help make sure that their plan is doing what they expected and meeting highest standards. So I participate in PAC meetings, sometimes get to do some travel and see people in person. And I am joined today by one of my favorite coworkers, Kate McBride.
Hello. I'm Kate McBride. I'm an accredited investment fiduciary analyst for the Center for Fiduciary Excellence and a board certified fiduciary. And with ERISA, and I'm an ERISA 402A specialist with Fiduciary Wise. And my other part-time job is as a member of the Department of Labor ERISA Advisory Council, where we meet in Washington to study issues of interest to the Secretary of Labor and report back to her. Hi, I'm Kate McBride with Fiduciary Wise. We know that managing retirement plans comes with a lot of responsibility, and having the right knowledge is crucial to making the best decisions for your plan and participants. That's why at Fiduciary Wise, we don't just provide fiduciary services, we're committed to educating those who manage retirement plans through resources like the Fiduciary Wise Brief. Our program delivers expert insights to help you navigate the complexities of ERISA, compliance, and the fiduciary risk management. If you're finding value in what you're hearing in this podcast and want to take your understanding to the next level, let's continue the conversation. Reach out to us at fiduciarywise.com/scheduling and learn how we can support you with the knowledge and tools you need to confidently manage your plans. So, this is episode 9, and it's about ongoing management of the plan. So we're going to start with how Fiduciary Wise does best practices. So let's talk about roles and responsibilities. And we can, we've had some of this in earlier episodes, but we can sort of start down that road. Marta?
Yeah, I think today in our episode about ongoing management, a lot of this has to do with how are you documenting. What do you need to document? So to kind of put a bow on all this stuff that we've been talking about. So we've been talking about in other episodes, service providers and who is doing what within the plan. So as you're figuring, and we talked about sometimes different service providers are providing a multitude of roles. Not every service provider looks the same, even in this similar space. So for roles and responsibilities, that needs to be documented. So I know here at Fiduciary Wise, we put together a chart that outlines the different service providers that are present for different plans, and then kind of a brief overview of what their role is regarding that. So then as those service providers, they may change over the years. Maybe your plan gets a new advisor, or maybe you add a service you haven't had before, like a 338, making sure that you are updating that, because one, if you have staff turnover, it's nice to be able to hand that over and say, hey, here's the people involved in our retirement plan. But also it's just good to have that lined out for everybody who's involved with your plan and who's supposed to be doing what, and have you should be getting all that ironed out, as we've talked about in some of these prior episodes.
Yeah, and roles and responsibilities is one of those things we also have outlined in our FORT, Fiduciary Oversight of Responsibilities and Tasks, in sort of more detail, showing who's in charge of a particular responsibility, who is part of that and overseeing it, who is just a member of that and has something to do with it, and all of these kind of 70 or 80 tasks each year, get done and accredited, dated when they're done, so that at the end of the year, we have this really good plan map that basically says this has all been done. and the date it was done and who was responsible for it. It's a really handy thing that we use, all the time with the plans.
I think you bring up a great point about, and I don't know if you meant to, about the fiduciaries of the plan too. So when you are outlining these service providers, which service providers are serving in a fiduciary role and which ones are not, and they are
Right.
still very important to the plan and getting things done for the plan. But it is important to note which ones of those have fiduciary responsibility. So as you are talking about, do it what's in the best interest of your participant, not saying that non-fiduciaries don't think that way, but just saying there is a different obligation for those
Right.
service providers who are operating in a fiduciary role.
Absolutely.
Also on our checklist, we also on our checklist, we have policies and procedures. So we have mentioned this, I think, in every episode that we have done. So what is policies and procedures? You want to start with that one, Kate?
Sure. So policies and procedures is something that probably most plan sponsors have. Not all of them have it in writing. There's a good reason why it should be in writing, though, and that is because the IRS and DOL have new programs in place that add to the ability of, well, let's talk about an error in a plan. There are myriad ways to make a mistake in a plan. A lot of them are
Sure.
very, very small, but sometimes they're larger than that. And the thing about making a mistake or having an error in a plan is that it needs to be disclosed immediately when found. It can't be hidden or it can become very serious. And then it can be solved. If they're small, a lot of the time they can be solved by the IRS's voluntary correction program. But to be eligible for that program, you have to have policies and procedures written that they can look at. So they don't have to be 1,000 pages. You can probably have good policies and procedures, fairly well detailed in between 10 and 40 pages. I would say lean on the shorter side because you don't have to make them, that precise. People just need to know what to do, who to talk to if there's a mistake, and how to correct it. But that can go a long way in helping correct mistakes that are made in a plan without having large fees or fines or things that happen if they're let go.
Yeah. So we talked about, and just for clarification, so the self-correction program is when you correct it yourself and you say, yay, I did it. Smiley face for me. Voluntary correction program is the one that you typically have to get an attorney involved. They write up all this, what you did and how you fixed it. There's a fee involved to submit that. And then you sit around and you wait for some government official to say, okay, we agree with the way that you corrected it. So not only is it an expensive process, but it is also a waiting game. So we do have some expanded opportunity to use that self-correction program, but you have to have this policies and procedures in place. So what kind of things does the policy and procedure include? Like your eligibility, how's it determined? Who's tracking it? Contributions, who's responsible for those? What's your definition of compensation? And these kind of keynotes about what kind of stuff should be included in is on the IRS website. So this isn't some special secret formula. They don't really give us a whole lot to go on. They don't provide us a template. They don't say this is how it has to be. In fact, as you mentioned, a lot of people have them, but they're not written down. But writing them down is the easiest way to, one, prove that you have them, and two, pass those along as the organization changes, or maybe you add somebody to the HR staff and they're like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know how we're doing this. So you've outlined all of those pieces.
Hey, I'm Isaac Wood with Fiduciary Wise. With years of experience helping plan sponsors, TPAs, record keepers, and advisors navigate the complexities of retirement plans, I understand that every client has unique needs. That's why our MEP, PEP, and DC group of plan services offer complete customization. Whether you're managing multiple plans or looking to streamline administration, we tailor solutions that fit your goals while also ensuring compliance with ERISA regulations. At Fiduciary Wise, we don't just offer cookie cutter options. We work closely with you to design a plan that maximizes efficiency, minimizes risk, and gives you the control that you need. Imagine the confidence of knowing that you have an experienced team behind you, guiding you every step of the way. If you're ready to take your retirement plan to the next level, let's connect. You can schedule a meeting at fiduciarywise.com/scheduling to see how we can help.
Policies and procedures that we've started to look at in more detail. You were talking a minute ago about contributions and distributions and, testing and administration, who signs the 5500, which is a fiduciary act with liability attached, how notices are provided, all those things, they can be done differently. So that's one of the reasons why these policies and procedures are helpful. Also, if somebody new comes into HR, and doesn't know the rules or the procedures yet, having the policies and procedures in place helps them get up to speed, if you get new people in. So it's really useful in a lot of ways. In monitoring. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It is a living document also. So
yes.
As things change, we had a conversation with a client this week, and they said, "Oh, well, we think we have those, but we had a change in record keeper, and so the process now looks a little bit different." So this isn't intended to be something that gets shoved in the bottom drawer and never looked at again. This is intended to be not just help if you have to do self-correction, but it is intended to be used and then updated as needed. Kind of a little training manual for how to operate your 401k.
Yeah. And I'm glad you talked about it being a living document, because sometimes new things come out from guidance from the DOL or IRS or even new regulations. And so those need to be taken into account too, because sometimes they change the way things are done. So that's an important thing to do. So it's sort of like, it's not a book that you put on the shelf. It's really a living, as Marta said, a living document that you probably want to keep in a safe place, but in a way that you can change it easily, because you'll want to update these, as things go on. Let's talk about monitoring at Fiduciary Wise. As the 402A named fiduciary for plans, we're monitoring all the service providers. We have meetings, we get reports from them. We benchmark services and fees every year, which is a really important thing, because that is one of the things that keeps us aware of where fees are in line with averages and expectations, and where they might be creeping up, or maybe someone is not being paid what they actually should be for the work that they're doing, and sometimes fees increase. We don't see that often, but it does happen sometimes if someone is doing more work than expected. Maybe it's an advisor who has participants in 20 different offices and actually, makes the effort to go out and do education at all of those offices, or, combines that video education in some and in-person education in others to keep the costs down. But that regime of bringing education to plan participants is really important. And it is a requirement in a rule that allows plan sponsors to select have an array of investment options that investors, plan participants, can select from in the plan. So it's funny how these things sort of, you think it's just policies and procedures, but it kind of meshes with a lot of the other rules that are go into being a plan sponsor. And so for what we do in terms of monitoring at Fiduciary Wise is we do these meetings, reports from service providers. We benchmark the services and fees, as I mentioned before. We look at the investment process, although we do not do the investments, but we do watch the process. We look at share classes. Sometimes plans are growing and they have to jump into the next lower cost share class. That's a good thing for plan participants, so we keep an eye on that. And then we look for valid, sound selection strategies that the investment professionals use. We're not investment professionals at Fiduciary Wise, although some of us have backgrounds as investment professionals, but we're not acting as that at Fiduciary Wise. That's important to know. And then I would say, the monitoring of all the service providers is as important as the monitoring of the actual investments. What do you think, Marta?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And you mentioned how we do things here at Fiduciary Wise, and we do have some tools to do that kind of thing. But for plan sponsors that don't have a 402A, certainly we'd love to talk to you. But
Absolutely.
that's still a requirement of the plan sponsor. So the fiduciary of the plan is responsible for monitoring service providers. That doesn't mean, and I know sometimes when Fiduciary Wise gets hired, it's like, oh wait, you guys are doing what? And it feels like, all of a sudden the principal's in your classroom. But this is not intended to be like a overbearing thing. This is just you have service providers that have agreed to do particular services for your plan, and they are receiving a particular fee for it. So
Right.
one, are they doing the things that they told you they would do? And two, are they doing it for a reasonable fee? And as you mentioned, reasonable fee doesn't always look the same. So again, we have some tools that we use for benchmarking and seeing what's going on within the plan. But just because a plan is paying more than another plan doesn't necessarily make it wrong, because they might be getting additional services that most plans aren't. Or as you mentioned, they might have 20 different offices and they've got somebody going to all of those to help promote, which is in the best interest of the participant to have access to resources readily available. So, all of those things have to be taken into consideration. And back to documenting that you have reviewed these things, that you've had these conversations, that your contracts are in place, that how much is being paid to your service providers. All of that is kind of part of that monitoring process.
Right. I think, it might be useful to go back to the sort of first thing, which is not all plan sponsors know that they are the plan fiduciary. They're the named fiduciary. It's the most important fiduciary that there is under ERISA. It is the one that is in charge of the entire plan. All of that burden is on the plan sponsor typically. Now, most plans don't know that actually they can take that burden and shift it to Fiduciary Wise. In other words, they're the plan fiduciary, the 402A named fiduciary, unless they actually know that there is a firm that will take that responsibility and liability from their shoulders and manage the plan professionally as the 402A ERISA named fiduciary and the 316 administrative fiduciary. So I think it's one of those things that, it's an aha moment. Did you know that well, let's back up an even bigger step. Did plan sponsors know that when ERISA was born we're going to go back to 1974, and then a few years later after that, when 401ks were born and people still had, a defined benefit plan, and the 401k was supposed to be the side pocket that you put extra money in so that you could travel in retirement or do whatever you want, go see the grandkids more, or whatever it is that you want to do in retirement. Well, over the years, the defined benefit pension plans have diminished, and the 401k plans have become the most prevalent retirement vehicle to save in. And so, I, for decades, have wondered, why are plan sponsors managing this plan when they're not, necessarily in the investment business? Most are not, and most don't have a lot of knowledge about how to run a plan. So why are they being made to run a plan? And I talked to some people at the DOL a while back, and I said, why is this happening? And they said, well, originally when ERISA was put together, they thought there'd be a pension plan and that this would be a part of the retirement that was adjacent, the side pocket. And so I don't think back in the beginning of ERISA, anybody really thought that the 401k would be the main retirement
be where it is now.
Vehicle.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing about being able to invest yourself, it was sort of like a mad money pocket for your retirement. You could do almost anything with it. And now it's much more serious because this is your main vehicle, So, it's a very different thing. And plan sponsors were not supposed to be the entity running the plan in the beginning. It was supposed to be a trustee. And it was found that was that was expensive to hire a trustee. So, these are companies, a lot of them already had a pension plan. So now they're going to hire a trustee to run the 401k plan. I don't know. It seems like, that what happened was they said it was too expensive and there wasn't enough uptake. So there was an update to rules or guidance that said, okay, the plan can be run by the employer, but the employers really didn't have the, training to do this. And And so by and large, it's, it is not done in a way that is best for the plan participants and the company. And so that's why when plan sponsors find out that they can shift so much of that responsibility to Fiduciary Wise, almost all of it, then they say, oh, I had no idea you guys were doing this. And, this is something I should, we'd like to talk about. Hi, I'm Kate McBride with Fiduciary Wise. Did you know that if you sponsor a retirement plan, if you sign the plan's Form 5500, more than 92% of the fiduciary risks and liability can fall directly on your shoulders? ERISA's complex regulations make it easy to miss key responsibilities and leave you exposed to costly penalties or legal action. At Fiduciary Wise, we help you manage that risk. We become the plan's named fiduciary, taking on the majority of those responsibilities. We work with your current service providers, including the investment manager, advisor, record keeper, and administrator, to ensure regulatory compliance. And we handle the heavy lifting so you don't have to. Our team is dedicated to protecting you and running your plan exclusively in the best interest of your employees, reducing your exposure to liability and giving you peace of mind. When you partner with Fiduciary Wise, you can focus on running your business, knowing that your retirement plan is in safe hands. Let's talk about how we can help shield you from fiduciary risk. Schedule a meeting today at fiduciarywise.com/scheduling.
I think,
It's
but
surprising.
back to that, your cost comment. I mean, we don't work for free, right? But I
No.
think about somebody mentioned. Yeah, I was on the phone with somebody yesterday, and they were like, "Fiduciary Wise is like insurance," and I was like, "No, Fiduciary Wise is like preventative maintenance. Our goal is to one, find issues before they become really big issues, ask questions to help some of those things come out before they turn into a monster, and provide some feedback and guidance on the front end of things when we can. So insurance is something bad happened and now somebody has to pay for it. So I think from the Fiduciary Wise side, we are like your preventative maintenance program. We are involved with the service providers. We are, trying to recognize things before they become an issue, and we are trying to keep things transparent and keep conversations happening. So I think in that way we are a little bit different than insurance. But to talk to the cost, I think our fees are quite reasonable for what we are doing in this space. But I think about what liability there could be in the instance there is something that isn't found or isn't addressed promptly, and how quickly those dollars can add up if mistakes happen in retirement plans. So there are, I mean, I don't, the government's, they don't look at 401k errors as a moneymaker. They're not out trying to find everybody's mistakes,
Right.
but they do happen. And when we're talking about doing what's in the best interest of the participant, and you have to make up some losses or, make deposits to the
Make the
plan that
plan
you
whole. Yeah.
make the plan
Yeah.
whole, that can get really expensive. And so if you
Yeah.
have the right service providers in place and you've got the most fiduciary protection that you can get, does that cost a little bit more than if you go get the cheapest plan you can? Yes, it does. But does that make for better outcomes for the plan as a whole and your participants also? Yes, it does.
Yeah, much better for the participants, I think, and much better for the plan sponsor. And I think overall, with a 402A named fiduciary watching over the plan and helping to manage that plan and make sure everything is being done that's supposed to be done, that I think overall costs come down. I don't think they go up. If they go up, it's not by much, because we're benchmarking all the time.
I think that's fair.
And we're looking at that
Yes.
all the time. So, I mean, I would say it's if it goes up a little bit, I would say it's more than worth it, but I don't see it when I look at plans going up much. I see it more being under control.
You're right.
And the
And
norms.
I love taking over plans and saying, oh,
Yeah.
some of these things haven't been done in a while, not necessarily because of any one party, but stuff, people quit looking at things, or it's been a while since the plan sponsor made time to look at it. So I love going into plans and being able to say, oh, look, we can make these few tweaks, and now we saved enough to cover the cost of Fiduciary Wise. I mean, it doesn't really get any better than that for me. It doesn't always
really,
work out that well. But I love being
really
able to go into
satisfying.
plans and do some. Oh, it's super satisfying.
Yeah.
I love to get plans back on track.
We love coming to work every day. Because we do.
Nerdy stuff we do over here.
I know. It is so much fun. Yeah.
All right. So kind of in summary, when we are talking about, ongoing management of the plan, what things we covered today, roles and responsibilities, how do you document that? What are your policies and procedures? And then how are you monitoring, or it is important too. And so you need tools in place to monitor those service providers, do your benchmarking, review the investments, and understand what that process looks like. One other note about that, I do feel like sometimes, like if you have hired a 338 and, you handed off the investment review stuff to them as the plan sponsor, yes, they are doing that, but also you hired them. So you need to understand what their process is for monitoring, not just, oh, hey, I hired somebody, so yay, I don't have to do that anymore. There's still, ultimately, the 402A fiduciary is still responsible for reviewing what they are doing and their process as well.
Reviewing that service provider. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're still being reviewed as part of the monitoring process as well.
Yeah. Sorry. On 338s, as you know, I'm a dork on that. I still think that that's one of the smartest hires that a plan sponsor can make, a 338 investment manager for the plan investment options, because that takes most of the burden off of the plan sponsor if they've hired that person prudently, and if they are watching over what that person does. It takes most of that burden off of them. And but there are ways to do it. It has to be in writing. There has to be a delegation to that service provider from the plan sponsor to that 338 investment manager. Once those kinds of things are done, then most of that liability is on them, but you still have to monitor them.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I like being a part of plans that have a 338, because then we don't spend so much time talking about the investments and having the committee vote on it. And I was involved in a committee several years ago, and after the committee would make a change at the next meeting, they would want to see what that fund was doing that they replaced and how it's comparing to the new one that they replaced it with, just to I don't make themselves feel better about their decision. I'm like, oh my gosh, you already made the change. Like, it doesn't, move on down the road. So sometimes I feel like committees get really caught up in making changes to investments, and it really, hiring that out is a terrific idea. All right. Well, Kate, I am so glad that you could join me today. And thank you, everybody, for turning into the Wise Fiduciary Podcast. We would love to hear your thoughts, answer your questions. So please drop us a comment, send us a message, schedule a meeting. You can find us at fiduciarywise.com/scheduling if you'd like to schedule an appointment with us. Don't forget to join us next time for more insights and discussions, and we hope to see you then. Thanks, everybody.